So last week we told you the story about John Terry, who'd been going around Chelsea's Cobham training ground turning off all the plug switches because he didn't want any red showing because it reminded him of all their hated rivals. And Ollie has emailed in with a similar story about Tottenham chairman Dan Levy. So Ollie says, Levy is hell-bent on making sure there's absolutely no red anywhere in the stadium or the training ground. So when Spurs built their new stadium, he banned red fire extinguishers. And he was also really worried about the use of red cranes to build the ground, because apparently cranes are usually red when you rent them. And he didn't want red towering over the ground for months on end. It was his new centerpiece. So instead, he insisted on buying the cranes instead of renting them and spraying them blue with the Tottenham crest on.
Wow.
And actually, I have checked, the cranes were blue and did have crests on them. And come to think of it, cranes are usually red.
Do you think, would there have been anybody who was passing by the Tottenham Stadium and genuinely was like, this is a fucking disgrace. There's a red crane on our site.
I actually think, given how fucking childish people are in the football world, like, I mean, we talked about last week, Carlo Ancelotti having too many red baubles on his Christmas tree and getting shit from Everton fans. So I don't think it's impossible that they would have got shit for that, especially as they were towering over. But it's pretty pedantic. And
It's quite out of character for Dan Levy, because he has this reputation as being so sort of miserly. The fact that he'd splash out. I imagine a crane. I've never bought a crane, unsurprisingly, but I imagine they're pretty pricey.
Yeah, and what do you do with them afterwards?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on the point of him being stingy, Alex Ferguson, who's been mentioned before on this pod, Alex Ferguson once said that striking a deal with Levy was more painful than my hip replacement. And they are famously painful. And there's that story about when Tottenham bought Luka Modric, and they bought him from Dinamo Zagreb. And the Zagreb director said later, after we agreed the transfer of Luka Modric to Tottenham, I politely asked Dan Levy for 5 of Luka's new jerseys. Levy gave them to me, but the invoice for the transfer, which was 23 million euros, was minus the value of the jerseys. It's like 200 quid.
On a £23 million deal.
Yeah, to be fair, he's got cranes to buy and spray, so it's expensive stuff. Actually, there's another good story about stingy football clubs. Ibrahimovic wrote in his autobiography, he said that when he did that season at Man United, they paid him 5 million quid. But in one of his paychecks, they deducted £1 for a bottle of fruit juice that he took out of a hotel minibar, which I just can't get my head around that.
Every little helps.
Yeah, it really does.